All right, so I'm here to talk about Frog God Games, The Blight. Why am I doing this video? As a GM, I've run a lot of different adventure paths, all of them published by Wizards of the Coast. And whenever I run it, I like to take a look at what other GMs have done when it comes to running these things. What kind of things did they notice? What did they change? What did they modify? Did they, improve or enhance certain things? And, in different groups and forums, I've always found tons of information to make the game better for my players. But when I was, prepping to run this, I found absolutely nothing. No one had really run this yet, and there really wasn't any advice. So I figured now that I'm running it, I'm actually getting pretty close to the end of the adventure path in this book, that I could sort of offer some of that insight, and folks looking to potentially run this might find it useful. So who is this video for? This is for GMs. If you're a player, this is going to be spoiler filled, and I would, click away from this. It will ruin your experience if you plan on playing in this. But if you're a GM, hopefully I'll be able to give you some stuff that will be helpful. I'm starting here with this intro video, and then I'm going to do a couple other videos after this, and I'll tell you what I'm planning to have in those. So what is this book? To some degree, I'm going to assume that you've read through this to some extent. It is a 900-page beast. So chances are you haven't read every word in it. I've, at this point, have read almost all of it. The first part of the book is a gazetteer of the city of Casterhage. It is great. I love it. The flavor, the settings, the places, all of it is great. If you plan on running the actual city itself, I think you'll have a good time. If you want to mine it for stuff for your own, settings, I think you'll get a lot of good stuff out of this. There's a bestiary in here, and then finally the Levee adventure path. I want to tell you a little bit about this way you kind of know what to expect. This is not a Wizards of the Coast product. And what I mean by that is it's not polished. When you get, for all its flaws, many of the Wizards Adventure Paths are ready to run. They're plug and play. There's things you might want to tweak, you might need to fix, but, for the most part, you can open up the book. You could probably read the chapter the night before and you can run it. I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, but you could do it. With this is going to be a lot harder. It's a very dense book. There's a lot of information in there. And this is the 5th edition version that I got, and I was running it in 5e. The conversion is iffy. There were mistakes in here. I think they probably originally wrote this for Pathfinder and then converted it over to 5e. And the 5e conversion was some of the stat blocks clearly have some of the language in there meant for Pathfinder. Some of the DCs or references to skills don't line up with 5e. For me, that wasn't a big deal. If you're a GM that needs everything to be sort of written out for you, you're probably not going to want to run this. This does take work to run. You're going to want to maybe modify things, change things. It's not a perfect conversion. The maps in here are representational. I'm assuming they meant for this to be run in person. You're going to glance at what's in the book, and then you're going to draw something or put together some terrain for your players. You're not going to be taking the maps from this. If you're running a virtual game on like Fantasy Grounds or something else, you're not going to be taking the maps out of here and putting them up there. For that purpose, they're absolutely terrible. I've had to, either find maps of my own and sort of reconfigure certain things. I've made some maps using Dungeon Draft. I've even used some of my 3D printed terrain to create some of the things and then just take photographs of it. And then through that into Fantasy Grounds. So you're gonna have to do some thinking when it comes to the maps, when it comes to doing combats and things like that. So it's not a an easy thing to run. That all being said, I think it is absolutely worth it. The city itself is just full of flavor. It's got, it's almost like this really dark, morally gray setting. It's very bleak at times. It's not your typical city setting that you usually see in D&D, especially when it comes to the stuff published by Wizards. You're getting something very different from what they would publish, which is what I think is one of the selling points for this. The bestiary in here, like I said, it's not a perfect conversion. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with improvising. If something doesn't look right or read right, I can improvise it on the fly. If that's not something you're comfortable with, you're going to have to put more work into prepping your stat blocks. I would say for like the lower level sort of enemies, I use the stat blocks as written in here. For the big bads or the bosses, doesn't matter what adventure path I'm running, I'm always going to be tinkering and reconfiguring those. And this was no exception to that. So there's a little bit of work in that. Now, the adventure path. That's where I think this thing can really shine as well. The Levee it's as written in the book, it's pretty good. It's conventional, unsurprising, but dark. I find that most adventure paths tend to be like that. I think the publishers are trying to reach the widest audience, and so they're trying to appeal to as many D&D groups as possible. And so, I think the adventure paths tend to be unsurprising. They're conventional. I mean, they're fun, they're good, but, they're not going to be throwing any weird curveballs at you. And this is, dark and twisted, and at the same time, fairly predictable. The way this is set up, the villain of the story is this, I don't know if we would call her an angel, but this angel called the Beautiful. And they try and kind of set it up like there's going to be some choices, like you might not kill her, or you might not eliminate her from the story, but really the way this goes, you're going to decide at the end of the game she's the villain and you need to take her out. And so it's fairly predictable in that way. I think this is an adventure path that, with some modifications and some tweaking, can go from just being good and conventional to being great and unexpected. My players right now are, I've had a few of them tell me they weren't expecting the direction some of this has gone in. They thought it was going one way, only to realize that it wasn't what they thought, which was really gratifying to hear from them. And I think they're having a really good experience as a result of that. And so what I'm going to talk about in some of my upcoming videos is actually what I did to make those modifications happen, and sort of what was written versus what I actually ended up doing, and just the ideas and suggestions that I have. I haven't finished the adventure path yet. I'll be interested to see where my PCs or players and their PCs go with it. But I think it's going to be a fun ride. And I don't think it's going to go where the people who published this thought it would go, which I think is a good thing. So what am I going to talk about in the upcoming videos? One, I'm going to talk about the villains. I think this is the key to any good story. Heroes are only as good as their villains. And I think the potential in this story for having some really good, memorable villains is great. So that's one of the things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the various NPCs in here. There's a lot of important NPCs, and I think there are some NPCs that were sort of in the background that I think can actually be a lot more important. There were some that were underutilized, I thought, or wasted in some ways, and I'm going to give my ideas on what you could do with them to just sort of tighten it up and make it better, at least in my opinion. I'm going to talk about religion in the city. I think this is sort of an important one only because, you know, in some ways it's a very religious city, though not in the way you're thinking. And I want to talk a little bit about that and how that might factor into your game. I'm going to talk about the politics of the city. You know, depending on sort of what level you're going to play this setting at, it may or may not be that important to you, but I kind of like to have the bigger picture and what I'm thinking of in Act 2 of my campaign with my players. Politics is going to be very important. So, you know, if you decide to do something similar to like what I'm going to suggest, you know, you might want to sort of think about that. And then finally, I'm going to talk about sort of how I started the campaign with my players, some of the modifications I made right off the bat, house rule type of stuff. I'm not going to go into painful detail about that, but stuff that I thought helps capture the flavor of the setting and the feel of the setting a lot better, and also getting the players hooked into the AP right from the start. And so I'm going to go over some of that stuff as well. So this is just my first intro video. If you're a GM who's planning on running this or is just considering running it, you're the folks, you're my target audience. You're the folks I'm hoping to pass on some of the lessons I've learned running this, and hopefully either, you know, make you consider running it with your players, or if you're already planning on doing it, make it a tighter, stronger experience. So hopefully you find these things useful, and I'll see you in our next video.